This segment is brought to you in part by the Canadian Historical Arms Society, owners of the Genesee Range, the premier recreational sport and training facility in Western Canada. See us online at historical-arms.com.
The Quiet Professional, a podcast about law enforcement, security, justice, and politics. We are digging deeper on the issues and going where the information takes us with access to experts and authorities. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Quiet Professional. Today we are talking about fixing public safety, a little bit of advocacy, and everyone's favorite, politics. For that, I've got the president and CEO of the National Police Federation, Brian Sauve, here in studio. So welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me, Nathan. It'll be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, well, I gotta say, you guys are some of the busiest people. It seems like every other day you're out there fighting, you're advocating for people, at least on the front lines. So, and as I always like to remind you, even the work you're doing, even though it's for RCMP members, it does have a major trickle-down effect for everybody else in this country. So I kind of look at it like you're fighting for law enforcement in general. So I really do appreciate the work.
Yeah, I mean, generally, obviously, like yesterday we had our little parliamentary breakfast, and even last year we were on a panel with, the Toronto Police Association and the Canadian Police Association. So as long as everybody's rowing, I think everybody's rowing in the same direction, it has more impact on the broad public safety landscape in Canada.
Yeah. You guys have been in front of the House of Commons quite a bit lately, and I thought maybe we would start there, just talking a bit about that process. So how does this even start? Like, how do the topics get picked? How do the people who are going to go in there get picked? How do you get in the door? Like, I don't know anybody who can get me in the door. So how do you get there?
Well, usually it starts with relationships. So on the one hand, we've got a fantastic government relations team here. Sarah and her crew, the majority of them actually used to work on Parliament Hill in some capacity, as an aide or a chief of staff or a policy advisor to some MP from some party. So they have those relationships. They know how the system works over I won't say the puzzle palace, but it is kind of a puzzle palace. And then, when legislation gets tabled, they're the ones that pay attention to everything is going to get tabled by the government. So for example, this government's actually been very active. Bill C2, Bill C4, 6, 8, 9, 12, 14, 16, all have...
I don't know how you keep all those straight even. I can't keep track of any of it.
I try not. That's what they're there for. And all of those have an impact on our membership, because they all impact either their benefits, from Veterans Affairs or pension to the criminal code. And then as part of it, like, for example, one of the most recent ones is Bill C14, which is talking about domestic and intimate partner violence. In order to get that legislation tabled, the Attorney General actually in the House of Commons convened a study. So last fall or early winter, the Justice and Human Rights Committee actually convened a study of Section 810 of the Criminal Code, peace bonds, restraining orders. Most people would consider them that way. So then, our team obviously has good relationships with the members of that committee and different members of Parliament. We pay attention to the studies they're doing. So we nudge them to sit back and say, we're happy to be a witness. That gets us on the witness list. And then from that, usually we'll draft a 3 to 4 page submission of what we would like to see or the issues at play. Then you get added to a panel and you show up and you get 5 minutes to speak, and then you get cross-examined. So,
okay. Well, yeah, actually, that rolls right into the kind of the next things I was wondering about was what are you allowed to say? What aren't you allowed to say? What are kind of the rules? So you said you get 5 minutes and I've seen when I've watched this on TV or, on social media, it kind of plays out like they say, okay, here you go. It's go time. and you have like a prepared speech or a prepared document, you read from it, and then what? Like, so they get to ask you questions, they get to dig into stuff. And what's the follow up? So the long term from that.
Yeah. So obviously, the legislation gets tabled in the House. It goes through its first reading. Assuming it passes its second reading, it'll go to first reading. It'll go to its second reading, and then it gets referred to the committee. And the committee is usually where they'll have witnesses that come and can talk about the pros and the cons from all aspects of the proposed legislation. So, for example, earlier this week was a private member's bill from Frank Caputo, who's an MP out of the Interior BC, Conservative, and he's got Bailey's Law, they call it. Bailey McCourt was a woman who was murdered by her husband in Kelowna, and he had already faced a number of conditions and was already released on I think it was probation. So one of the proposals in there is to make all domestic and intimate partner violence crimes or murders automatically first-degree murder.
Okay.
So from our perspective, cool. That's, from a law enforcement perspective, I think that's an interesting idea and we would support that. But our one reservation is, well, what if it's someone who's defending themselves from an attack from a partner and you end up killing the aggressor?
Yeah.
Well, it's still domestic and intimate partner violence, but the person who is defending themselves is charged with first-degree murder. So, you just point out those things to the committee. They can have discussions on it. Maybe we recommend some amendments, different things. At the same time, they're proposing a number of new offenses for domestic and intimate partner violence and categorizations. And our side of the house is, well, we want to be careful that our members are not scrutinized after the fact for making the wrong decision in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, we have these new offenses for classification of IVP, intimate partner violence, IPV, possible offenses. Is the member responding to that situation going to get scrutinized because they didn't go with this offense or they went with that one? And really, should it really not be up to the courts? So, take it out of the hands of the police. No bail is a strong one. It's a good one for an intimate partner violence offense. That way you're automatically going before a judge and then the Crown can determine what's the right offense, right? It takes it out of the police officer's hands and such. So, and then, going through third reading, they'll do a clause by clause. They go through it. They will accept amendments. They'll not accept amendments. Then it comes back to the House of Commons and then over to the Senate. And then usually, sometimes, if it's still a contentious bill, we might get an opportunity to appear as a witness again at the Senate before a completely different group and maybe propose some amendments there as well.
So would that be kind of where this be Bill C12 is at right now? Because that's actually split from a prior bill. But it came back for like more consultations.
Yeah, C12 started as C2. It was this government's, Strong Borders Act. And within C2, there was a lot of resistance for the section of digital lawful access for law enforcement, right? To be to put us up to speed and equal with our Five Eyes partners to be able to have digital lawful access, which we can talk about more down the road. They pulled that digital lawful access portion. C2 is just sitting on the shelf now. It didn't go any further. And then they rebranded everything else, like authorities for the Coast Guard, DND, police officers, and all that great stuff for the Strong Borders Act and rebranded it into C12. That one's already gone through committee. As far as I know, it's sitting at the Senate and almost ready to come back to the House of Commons. So it will probably pass and we'll have some positives come out of that.
We said that like when there's pushback, do you as the NPF, or maybe you can speak broadly on law enforcement in general, but do you have any sort of say or pushback yourself? Like when these other groups come in and say, hey, we don't like this, like if it's some civil liberties group or a group of lawyers or whatever it might be, they come in and say, we don't like these pieces to a bill. At any point, do you get to speak to those people and say, well, we're just trying to do this, and it's going to be signed off by a judge, and there is all this oversight? Or is it just they kind of talk to the standing committee or whoever it might be, and then you talk to that group and see where it kind of falls?
Well, I think it depends.
Hmm.
I mean, our team watches almost all of the witnesses appear, because it doesn't all happen in one day, and it's not all one session. Usually there's panels of witnesses for like an hour here, an hour there, an hour here, an hour there. Our team watches other witnesses, like, I don't know, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association might appear as a witness and make some recommendations and answer some questions. So our team will pay attention to that. And then we would probably, assuming we're called after them, then we can work it into our submission. We can work into our opening remarks. We can work into how we frame our responses based on what other witnesses have already said.
Okay.
So we can, talk about how, yes, there's oversight. Yeah, there's all of these things, and police don't overstep, and it's a judicial authorization. It's not our authorization. We're not just walking in to seize your phone, that kind of stuff.
So don't ever go first. That's what you're saying.
That's part of it, especially in my world. What I've learned is usually we like to let the RCMP go first.
Yeah. Okay.
So that we can counter what may or may not have happened already.
Well, okay. So that's interesting too, because, and I think I brought this up in some other discussions we've had, but sometimes I'm surprised that it's, the Federation that's out there arguing for these things, where I think, like, if police want access to something, it should be the police service asking for it. But then the associations come in, and I always find that just an interesting dynamic. So you're saying, so the RCMP, like, they have a seat at the table, and then the NPF also has a seat at the table, but you could even be asking for different things.
Oh, for sure. And like, if we're talking about digital lawful access, for example, the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police was hugely supportive of it, as were like Peel Regional, Toronto, like all of those police services. I think the challenge with this one that was in C2 was, it's a decades-long battle, and how it was framed in 2012. It became an us versus them battle in 2012, and really,
like, the public versus police, or
public or civil liberties groups versus police, the government, surveilling, all of that great stuff. And really what it is it's an educational piece, right? Like, people need to understand that the idea of digital lawful access is really basic subscriber info, for example, for a cell phone, right? And the requirement for a cellular phone company or a telco to actually maintain that and provide it in a reasonable amount of time, not the 45 to 50 to 60 days that they do right now. Similarly, because, we might be investigating a kidnapping, and we probably want to know quick.
Yeah.
Aside from the exigent circumstances that we can use through judicial authorization, but in normal terrorism, national security, or organized crime investigations, you're going to want to get that information in a timely manner, because in today's digital world, sometimes IP addresses will last for an hour or a day or a week, and then the information's gone. And sometimes it's stored outside of Canada, and we don't have any ability to actually force those external jurisdictions unless we go through the MLAT process, which is quite cumbersome, going up to
it's super long,
over to Attorney General, down to an external law enforcement agency, right? So, and our partners, the Five Eyes and Western nations, they all have it, and they're like, "Wow, you guys don't." It's becomes a challenge, right? So,
yeah. Well, maybe on that, let's talk a little bit about Bill C-12. And I think you mentioned it a bit earlier that we're the only one of the Five Eyes who does not have this. A large component of it talks about sharing information, across borders. So, and you kind of mentioned the MLAP process. I've done that one time. I've consulted on it twice. One of the times is like, it's not worth the time or money because so many people are involved. You pull a lot of people away from maybe some of the things that they have to do. But it is quite a cumbersome process. And I had to do it when I was talking with the DEA about a file, and we were just trying to share information. And what's funny is like you have all these relationships and you can talk back and forth across the border. And when it comes time to use the information, they have to go through the proper channels. So, they know lots of things ahead of time. And it's like, can we streamline this? Because, like you said, the time of some of this evidence, it's gone. It evaporates. It disappears. People erase it. So, it was just surprising once we got to a point like a year into an investigation where it's like, okay, now's the time for the formal process. And then that alone is like a 6-month ordeal. And it's like, you already have all the info. We're both law enforcement agencies. Like, why are we jumping through all these hoops that like they're not a part of the court process necessarily. They're not reviewing the information to say like whether you obtained it lawfully. There was just a lot of surprise when I started going through that process. So, when we talk about C12, I think a big part of it is the education that you mentioned when we want to get civil liberties groups on board, the government on board, whoever it might be. Just kind of explaining to them and having people such as yourself in front of them saying, look at this process. Is this not like the bureaucracy and some of the outdated policies and the things we have to do? Like it makes sense to just streamline some of it and get to the point, but also keep up with the times. So maybe want to comment on that a bit.
Yeah, no, like just to clarify, so C12 is not moving forward digital lawful access, right? That was initially proposed in C2, which is now gathering dust on a shelf. C12 is more Stronger Borders Act. But an interesting part that people will find, I think a lot of Canadians will support in C12 is information sharing at the border, for example. It used to be questionable when let's say a known firearms trafficker is coming up to Canada at the Niagara border crossing, right? Goes to CBSA or goes through the CBP side of the house, license plate flash, all that great stuff, alarm bells pop up. The information sharing from CBP to CBSA at the border to be able to interdict was nebulous. Right. And it was kind of like, can we share this with you? Can we not share this with you? So one of the things in C12 is clarifying that information sharing. So, if there are known offenders, whether they drug smugglers or firearms traffickers, whatever, who are passing through into that no man's land between Canada and the US, by the time they get to the CBSA portal, right, CBP can now share that information with us, and then CBSA can act on it. And the same with the reverse, right? Going south. One of the other things that C12 is fixing is sharing of convicted sex offenders on the sex offender registry with the United States on a more regular basis. So it always was where the U.S. would share those who are on the sex offender registry coming into a Canadian airport, perhaps for departure to an international destination. So we would know, but it didn't happen the other way around. If we had, if we had a convicted sex offender on the sex offender registry in Canada, it wasn't always automatically shared with the United States if that person was flying to Baltimore, for example. So now it's going to become a more automatic information sharing. And I think those are some of the things when I've met with the Homeland Attaché here in Canada. Those are some of the things. Clarifying indemnity for CBP officers that operate in Canada. And they do, you go to Toronto Airport, there's a pre-clearance area where United States Customs Border Protection are if you're flying into the States. So they have indemnity, and the example I've given is within that pre-clearance area, if a husband and a wife get into a domestic because they're tired of traveling and people's nerves are frayed, CBP can intervene and be indemnified like law enforcement, supported should something happen. But if they go to the Starbucks outside that pre-clearance area to get a coffee and there's a domestic happening there, they're not indemnified. So clearing up those little things to have more great joint coordination of law enforcement and sharing. That's all in C12 and moving forward. So we're really looking forward to seeing that get in place.
It makes me think of just even within Canada, how every time we do a joint forces operation, like we'll go monitor all the biker runs. And, if it's like, well, whose use of force are we going to use? And who's covering who if there's a lawsuit? And it's just like, how's this not just worked out already? Like, it's in this area or it starts here, we're going to go under this and done. But it's a discussion every single time, every time. It's just, like, let's write some of this stuff down and then follow it. So I like that it's getting clarified.
Yeah, it is. And, I think the lawful access piece is going to be coming. And I was encouraged that, both parties seem to be working together on that one because I think both parties want it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see where that goes down the road. And off she goes.
What would they be waiting for? Like, so are they just worried about focusing on C12 first and then going back to C2? Or is that like they still do some modifications in the background?
It's my understanding that they're holding consultations right now. So before the legislation is drafted, they're talking with constitutional lawyers and experts in those fields to ensure that the proposed legislation is going to respect people's charter rights to privacy, but at the same time provide further access or lawful access through the judicial branch for police for specific things. So, and Dr. West at Carleton is one of the most educated folks on this. She's been studying for 15 years. And the example she gave yesterday. So, for example, can police ask an online naturopathic in vitro facility if this is a client there?
Oh, okay.
Great. Okay. Yes. But at the same time, can we also ask for how long have you been a client there? What treatment you're getting? How often do you go? Who's right? So the making sure that the limitations of respecting people's privacy for law enforcement are just to the information that we need in order to do the production order or to do the search warrant versus being able to get all of that stuff, which we really don't need, don't want. But, if we can get it, some police officer somewhere is going to stretch it and all of a sudden we'll end up in a Supreme Court case and some conviction will get thrown out. So
it makes it, I mean, I guess the closest example I could think of to that is like searching a phone subsequent to an arrest for maybe drug trafficking. Yeah. And if it's unlocked, it's like, okay, well, what was the exact path you took through the phone and why? Like, why'd you click on this and then this? Why was that relevant to your case or your investigation, I should say? On that, I wanted to ask too, because I saw that with Bill C-12, there's a piece in there about Canada Post.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk a little bit about this? Because there was a recent case, I think it was Montreal. I've been reading so much news lately, it's hard to keep it straight, but I'll say it was Montreal, and they busted a group of 4 that were shipping stuff to the US. So it was a bunch of fentanyl and meth. But I mean, Canada Post has a huge part to play in the drug trafficking that goes kind of in and out of this country. So can you talk a bit about this component to the bill?
Yeah, well, I mean, originally in C2, they had actually expanded the authorities of Canada Post to be able to search questionable packages leaving but also coming into Canada. And I'd have to double check on C12. I think it's just the coming into Canada now. They've eliminated the leaving, but yeah, it's a huge thing, and it's a great asset from at least from our perspective, from the policing perspective to Canada. If you have more eyes who have greater authority to be able to interdict at the early onset.
Yeah. Well, I feel like a lot of that is just, you dump it off at whatever your package is at Canada Post and it goes, it's like, well, it's only got like one person somewhere in that process. It's really got to get by. But if you can add in like 3 people, 4 that at least have the ability to kind of scrutinize a package or whatever might be sent, then the chances of it being stopped are much greater. So seems like a common sense thing.
It is, and I mean, legislation is great, and you'll see anything that we submit to Parliament that has impact on law enforcement, right? You can put anything in legislation. That's fantastic, sure. But one of the things that we try and tout every time or pound our fists on the table about is think about the downstream impacts, right? So is this going to have an impact on a police officer or the public safety continuum in a province or a municipality? If you don't resource it in the front end, it's still not going to work, right?
Yes.
So like we can do all we want on bail reform, great, federally. But if there's not enough judges, there's not enough Crown prosecutors, there's not enough pretrial detention facilities, there's not enough people to monitor bail, well, it's still going to fail, right? So,
well, that's one thing I kind of had written down here was I would call it kind of a window dressing. So, the politicians get to go out and say, yeah, we're fixing this, but they never talk about all the stuff that has to go on in the background to make that actually work. So not only is it the funding, but you need the bodies, the people to do it, or the technology. You need equipment. You need the training and the specialties. So if you don't have those in place, it's either years out that this is going to take actual effect, like we're going to see a material result from it, or it's just never going to happen at all. So they do an announcement, but it's like nobody did anything with it. And I think the biggest component, going back to what you were saying earlier, is the education piece, like letting the public know this is why we're doing what we're doing. That actually comes up a lot around some of the drone technology. People think it's like this big spy operation. It's like, I was talking with one of our city councilors about these and just kind of saying, like, I think people need to realize how much money they would save if we use drones more, how much safer it would be, than a cop having to drive 100 kilometers an hour to something. You just have a drone flying to it. Much safer, less gas, less wear and tear. So not only saving lives, but you're saving on maintenance costs and stuff. But there's like this big brother kind of conspiracy that comes out of it. It's like, if we just educated the public and said, this is how we use it, this is what it looks like, this is what it does, this is what it can't do. People think we have these capabilities that we don't. But I think a lot of that comes up to the education piece. But that never seems to really get built in.
Yeah, the drone as first responder is actually really interesting. I represent, close to 20,000 members of the RCMP, and I wouldn't want to. It's a difficult position to be in, to advocate for technology that's going to take away from members' jobs, right? So from that perspective, however, can it be something that keeps our members safer, right? Tumbler Ridge, it's probably still too soon. They were there fast, but in any scenario where you've got an active shooter, can the drone provide you advanced guidance or advanced visuals of the scene to make your approach in an IR formation safer? And they had that in Nashville 3 years ago at the Christian high school shooting, where actually their airship, so it was an airship, but could have been a drone that went to the school first, and being able to point out where the shooter is or where the activity is to make the approach safer.
Yeah, one of the leaders I think in this is Las Vegas police. I see them they do quite a bit of marketing around this. Like they got all their social media going. The one thing actually, and maybe I'll just ask about this, would it necessarily take away from jobs, or does it just change the jobs that we have? Like if I'm a police officer on the street and I go to the calls, but now I say, okay, we're going to have a drone do this, just to simplify it. Well, now I need someone to pilot the drone, or I need somebody to do something behind the scenes to make that drone actually work. Like I feel like we're not necessarily losing jobs, but it's definitely going to change the function of the members, the education that they need and the training they need and the supports. So would it necessarily lose positions?
I don't know.
Yeah.
And there are a few PDs in the States. Like I know NYPD has started to pilot, I think it's almost a year old now, the drone as a first responder technology. There's one in California that's been using it for a number of years. If I don't get the name wrong, I think it's Chula Vista, just north of San Diego. And from what I understand in Chula Vista, because they've been doing it for 3 to 4 years, is they've actually been able to clear a lot of their CAD calls, like the nuisance 911s, if you will.
Yes.
When you're responding to a shouting match on the corner of walk and don't walk, right? It's a priority 4 call, maybe a priority 5 call in the queue. It'll get dispatched 20 minutes, 30 minutes after it's come in because we've had other higher priority calls. So can you send a drone out there and nothing happening here, right? And you can clear the CAD call from the drone versus wasting that human resource. So I think there's advantages. It's just cautious progression in that particular field, in that particular area. There's really good uses for drones with your critical incident packages and your ERT teams or your SWAT teams, where they can approach a house and launch a flashbang through a window or smoke grenade through a window, so the team doesn't necessarily have to expose itself to possible gunfire or assault and stuff like that. So those things are kind of definitely positives.
And just before I kind of move on to something different, I did want to just go back to talking about some of the groups that have criticisms about these bills. So if we're talking about like civil liberties groups or anyone for that matter, do you have any interaction with these groups offline where you can kind of explain stuff? Like, do you have relationships with them to explain, hey, this is actually what we're just trying to do? Because I feel like that'd be maybe an easier forum to just talk to people and have like a normal conversation rather than, I don't know if it's like, maybe it gets contentious in front of Parliament. But do you have those relationships with those groups?
We do and we don't. And it really depends. And I think like we go from the premise, the NPF's gone from the premise, the membership of the RCMP, and I think everybody just wants a happy, healthy, safe Canada, right? So let's start with that premise, right? Ours is, well, okay, we're responding to crimes and we're trying to prevent crimes and keep people safe. So how do we do that? And no police officer wants to violate someone's charter rights unless it's saved by Section 1. But nobody wants to wrongfully imprison someone. Nobody wants to do an unlawful search. We don't want our cases going up to the Supreme Court of Canada to be analyzed and thrown out, right? We want to do it right in the first instance. So I think we start from that premise. And I remember through the George Floyd Black Lives Matter stuff way back when, there was an opportunity to talk on some issue. And I was on a panel with someone from the Black Legal Action Committee from Toronto. And we want the same thing. So we actually struck up a pretty good conversation. And it was interesting, just a completely different way of going about it from them versus how we're going about it from us. And similarly, on Section 810 of the Criminal Code, that particular study, it was, I'm the only police officer in the room, and there's a healing lodge with survivors. There was 2 ladies from a project in Quebec about training for police officers. So, but talking with Hilda was sitting right next to me. We actually struck up a really good conversation from a First Nations reconciliation perspective, overrepresentation in the justice system for First Nations Indigenous men, as well as overrepresentation from First Nations Indigenous women as victims of intimate partner domestic violence. And then, we're having a good conversation. And she was actually at the same committee I was 3 days ago, just on a different panel. So really, I think if you approach it from the perspective that we want the same things, and it's not us versus you.
Yeah.
Right. Let's figure out how we can work together. And there are some that are more militant. The BC Civil Liberties Association, for example, they've had some executive directors that have made less than favorable social media commentary.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll respond to those, usually individually. But yeah.
It makes me think of some of the politicians that I've spoken with or had out on ride-alongs. And I think some of the forums, whether it's intentional or not, set you up for an adversarial approach. And whether people are right or wrong in thinking this, they get into there and they go, okay, this is an us versus them situation. Or, when you're there and you got your 5 minutes to speak on something and you're just blasting through it, sometimes it won't have the context or the nuance that you would have in like a normal conversation. So that's why it's nice to interact with people outside, kind of on your own time, in your own way, and you go, well, why did you say that? Or what do you actually mean by this? You say, well, actually, if you look at it from this perspective, our perspective. So I just thought, yeah, it's I get there's totally the militant ones, and they have a goal and or an agenda, and that's it. So it's like, okay, well, we're not going to get along. We can deal with that. But it's I think the majority of people, they want the same thing and they want to get along. Not that it's all sunshine and roses. I know that. So I'm not going to, bullshit anybody on that. But it's, I think there's more common ground than people are led to believe. And so it's just an interesting perspective. I thought I'd ask that. You mentioned the Section 810 peace bonds. So talking about the intimate partner violence, what's some of the work that you've been doing around this? I mean, this is like Canada-wide. This is a huge problem. So I go to these calls day after day with a lot of the same people. So it seems like nothing's been getting solved. And yeah, we've had some serious violence and deaths as a result of kind of nothing changing. So you guys are looking at making some changes.
Well, we aren't, but the government is.
Well, you're helping.
Yeah, we're providing a perspective of some of the weaknesses that we see, and I think victims and survivors find one of the weaknesses is I walk into the police station, nothing's going to happen, right? It doesn't afford any protection, right? I mentioned Bailey McCourt, for example. I've got a colleague over at Carleton who had one of her PhD students who was murdered on Victoria and Vancouver Island. In December, was also did everything right. So there, how do we make it easier, and how do we make it a stronger piece of legislation or a stronger section of the criminal code, so that victims and survivors actually do feel heard, do feel protected, and do feel that there is an ability to report. And that's what's led to, Frank Caputo's private members bill. And I know the government, I think Bill C-16, which hasn't been tabled yet, they're still working on it, is going to talk a little bit about that. There's like an anti-hate crimes law, which is going to work in some of those provisions and stuff. So I'm just happy that the conversation's happening. Right?
Yeah.
And that people that government is actually recognizing that this is a problem, and they need to try and fix it. So it's kind of like, okay, so bail reform, it took a couple of tries to get something strong enough. Maybe this will start the discussion down that road, and I just think it's great that we're moving that direction.
Well, on that, like your organization is looking at more of a coordinated effort across Canada. So like this comes down to like the sharing of information on the police side. I mean, I have my own bone to pick with CPIC, which and basically just to like maybe explain it for people who aren't in law enforcement, but CPIC is just it's a database where we can see what conditions people have across Canada, if they're subject to conditions or they got outstanding warrants. Um, but it is not updated in a timely manner. Like conditions on there are sometimes old, sometimes addresses are way out of date. Like it's a very slow moving system. But when we are talking about like the conditions side of it, peace bonds are listed on there, and those can be out of date as well. Sometimes it takes a week or longer to get the information onto the system. And we know that when people get released, they might just go out and go straight back to their partner, and some violence gets committed in the interim before the conditions show up, and then you go, oh, I didn't know that was on there, I got to go back and find them now. So
Yep.
yeah, so there has to be a much more coordinated effort. I guess is kind of the component that you're speaking about.
That's part of it, but it also goes back to one of the challenges with bail in Canada too, right? Is so let's say a victim of domestic violence chooses to uproot themselves and leave, or an offender has conditions of not to go back and they uproot and leave, and maybe they change provinces. So the charges are still outstanding in, I don't know, Prince George, BC, and they've moved to Calgary. Does Calgary PD actually have access to BC's court system to know what the conditions they are that are on, or how many times they violated those conditions, especially if the substantive charge of assault is dealt with through a plea and there's 12 breaches of recognizance or breaches of a peace bond that go away via stay of proceeding. And now you're in Calgary as someone and you reoffend. Like all of those alleged breaches should have an impact on whether or not you're granted bail and how strict the conditions are, or how easily someone can get an 810 peace bond and how strict it's going to be enforced in Calgary, the new jurisdiction. So there's protection of the victim's information as to where they choose to move. Should they choose to move? Should they choose to change provinces, change geographic locations, and how the offender may be able to find them, whether it's via social media and all those types of things. But at the same time, once a conviction is entered, or probation is entered post-conviction, a different jurisdiction doesn't necessarily have access to the same information. And Canada is a big country, right? People move provinces all the time.
So would that be looking at like getting everybody on the same just the same program to operate on one system?
Yeah, and ideally real time, right? Like we're in 2026. You can't tell me that provinces and jurisdictions across Canada can't find a software platform that they work on in real time across the country.
Well, I thought it didn't faxing just come out of the criminal code, like that was within my career. So in the last 12 years, we were still faxing things.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, and the challenge is, of course, you got to get every province and territory on board. There's got to be some investment provincially, territorially. But our position is, the federal government, they can take a leadership role here. Like take a leadership role. Say it's been a problem. Like we'll invest, I don't know, a couple $100 million to get you started, and then work together to figure it out. Right.
Yeah, I guess when it comes down to the provinces, they don't want to say, well, we're all just individually footing some bill for whatever initiative the feds might have.
Yep.
Even though you'd think it's like, okay, this is something we could all agree on. Still comes down to dollars and cents sometimes. All right. Just as we're kind of coming to the end of time, I want to make sure we get this in. The gun buyback or confiscation, however people want to frame it. Do you have any updates on this? Do you understand how any of this is going to work? Because I can't figure this out or seem to get a straight answer. It's actually kind of nerve-wracking.
I mean, I met with the minister 2 weeks ago, I think, was the last time I had an update on this particular program. Um, Still a little confused. So it's my understanding that, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, the provinces
Mm-hmm.
are out. They're not participating, so it has no impact there. The city of Winnipeg is participating with the Winnipeg Police Service. Ontario is out. They're not participating. And Quebec is participating. And then the Atlantic provinces are kind of, Halifax is, Cape Breton is, and questionable the rest. And British Columbia is going to participate. So how it's going to work, from what the minister did tell me, what his staff did tell me, is there will be no police officers going to houses.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that because that was one of our big concerns, right? You got, Fred, who's got a basement full of now prohibited weapons, and he's like, I hate the government. I'm going to call a whole bunch of cops here to willfully give up my guns and just open fire as they hit my front lawn. So that's not going to happen. There's no cops going to houses. It will all be, and this is where you're going to have more questions than answers, just like I do. It's all going to be based on mobile collection units. And if I choose, if I'm in a jurisdiction that's participating, or I'm a Canadian, even if I'm in Alberta and I want to give up my guns to be compensated for them from this pool of money that's going to be huge eventually, I can make an appointment. So come April 1st, everyone who's registered to hand over a gun, possibly for compensation, will be notified to make an appointment. And that appointment will be at a specific place where there's a mobile collection unit. What does that mobile collection unit look like? I don't know. Is it a picnic table in a park? Is it a 48-foot trailer with 2 Brinks security guards? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's like kind of what I picture they've done a few times in the US, where they just have like those days where you just show up with whatever kind of gun you have, and we won't ask questions, and people are laying down like Mac 10s and AK-47s. You're like,
yeah. And the interesting challenge is going to be, okay, so I've got my appointment at 10:20 a.m. down at wherever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now I'm going to be walking outside my house with 2 or 3 or 1 long gun, most probably, and Nancy across the street is going to be like, "What's Brian doing with that gun out there?" 911. He's leaving in a gray sedan, heading west on First Street, and he put a gun in the back of his car. Oh, so is that going to mobilize a police response, do you think?
Yeah,
probably. Yeah. So it's more questions than answers. What's it going to look like? Don't know. I haven't seen a more polarizing issue in a long time. And because premiers are openly saying no, chiefs of police are openly saying no. Yeah. And it's just, I don't
know. Have they said, and this is kind of in conversations I've had, where it's like, well, what are they going to do with the people that don't want to turn their stuff in? At the end of the day, it's like, okay, well, you lawfully purchased it. You didn't do anything illegal with it. And just the next day, someone just comes and says, give me your property. Well, I'm pretty sure that's the definition of bullying, but those are my words, not yours. And so what could they do if you don't? So they talk about criminalizing people. So just overnight, you're going to say hundreds of thousands of people are now criminals. And then on top of that, is there, have they said like, okay, well then, you just won't have access to any federal benefits, or we won't renew your passport, like all these kind of things, like any programs that they control, could those be kind of on the table for how they have, I don't know, implement some effect on you?
I don't think, from what I've seen, from what I know, the voluntary program is open right now until March 31st, I think. So you can voluntarily log on and say, I've got 2 or 3 guns I'd like to get rid of, hoping to get some money for them. Cool. That's on until March 31st. And then the mobile collection unit stuff starts April 1st and stuff. But from what I understand, the amnesty period, if you have a now prohibited weapon in your basement or in your gun locker or wherever it might be, the amnesty period ends October 31st this year. And it's been extended numerous times since 2020. What they've told people is you just must deactivate that firearm. Okay. So are we going on the honor system? Cool. Trust Canadians. They will deactivate their firearms come November 1st. No one will have a prohibited weapon. And then obviously, it will be a criminal code offense to possess that weapon. And should the cops get called to your house for whatever reason, they end up doing a 117 seizure. They find that, you still have prohibited weapons. That might be new charges in addition to whatever the substantive charges are for the reason the cops were called there. So I think that's kind of how they're looking at it right now, unless there's more to come. But I don't think it's, like from what I've been told, there's no cops going to houses to double check or check. We don't have a long gun registry anymore. So do you even know where all these guns are?
I look at some of the stuff that the CCFR talks about, and they kind of run through some scenarios that I think are valid and are grounded in some pretty in fact. And just coming from the law enforcement side, I say, well, I mean, I wouldn't put it past people to dig in the way that they kind of mentioned, where it's like, we don't have the long gun registry anymore. However, since you did start getting those, I think the transfer numbers, and that was since 2021. I mean, there is a way to go back through, and it would require a lot of digging and a lot of connecting dots. Now, would anybody have the time to do that? Hell no, because that would be so intensive. But, if they really wanted to get one or two people because they got some bone to pick with them, well, I mean, maybe that's possible. It's just, there's so much up in the air. And there are a lot of cops. There are a lot of police officers, law enforcement that have firearms that are on the prohib list. And I don't know if they're, super inclined to be a part of this program. So
that's why I say I've got guns, right? I've got a 30-30 lever action. I've got a shotgun. And actually, as they were going through the prohibited list, I was kind of like, wait, I got to dig through this to see if any of mine are right. And just for barrel length and all that kind of stuff. And, but I know people, a lot of members that are like, it's just bullshit, right? Like it's silly, right?
All right. Well, we're just kind of at the end of our time here. I want to say thanks for all you're doing, and we're keeping an eye out. And I appreciate the work that you do, and I will continue to share what you guys are putting out, because I think you're putting out stuff again to the education piece that I'm not seeing elsewhere. So I want to say thank you for you and your team and the work that you do in educating Canadians as a whole, because some of this stuff, it's we think it's just for law enforcement, or that, you're only fighting for them. But I think you guys do a lot of work that not only helps all of Canadian law enforcement, but Canadians in general really understand the issues that we are kind of trying to tackle today. And, getting that education piece is massive to that. So thank you.
No, well, thank you, because I think your podcast is awesome and you cover a variety of topics, which is also educational in nature. But I think what I always try to remember is that in Canada, all of the polling that we do, Canadians trust their cops, right? And they are very highly regarded as far as in a position of authority. So the more we can do to support and recognize and have Canadians, whether it's RCMP or not, actually support their police officers, then that's a good thing.
Those are great words to wrap it up. So thank you, Brian. We will chat again.
Thanks, Nathan.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening in and following along with the discussions. Be sure to click the follow or subscribe button on your respective listening platform. Also, check out the Quiet Professional on X and Instagram under TQP780. And most importantly, Please share where you can. Everyone has a part to play in getting these education and information pieces out there, so pass it along. Thanks again.